Voted on that deal. Joining me now from Capitol Hill is Republican Congressman Tom Cole of Oklahoma, who broke with his party in late November by suggesting the GOP should consider a deal with a tax hike. Congressman Cole, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Luke.
I got to hand it to you, Congressman Cole. A big headline in the Washington Post today. Why Tom Cole was right. Quote, Cole and McConnell seem to have grasped the long-range strategy, dictated a deal be done on the Fiscal Cliff with as little public airings as grievances, Festivus reference, as possible. Unfortunately for Cole, his House Republicans colleagues didn't listen, and they are now paying the price. So, Congressman Cole, I got to ask you, do you think that for future fights your colleagues will follow your advice, and how much damage has this done to the House GOP brand?
Oh, I don't think it's done a lot of damage. Look, sometimes in politics, like in war, you fight a holding action so the Army can escape. And I think that's what you saw. We had a Dunkirk scenario, but the Army's off the beaches and back where it belongs. And the fights ahead of us are fights that we're very well positioned for and we're very united about. And that's spending. And we've got the sequester vote, the continuing resolution vote, and the debt ceiling vote in front of us. And if the president thinks that he's not going to negotiate, he better think again. He's President of the United States. He's not emperor of the planet. And we're going to have to see the kind of spending cuts and entitlement reforms he's talked about. I take him at his word. He said he'd like to put those on the table. We haven't seen them. So I'm looking forward to seeing them literally in a matter of days. I mean, this next 90 days is going to be really critical for restoring the fiscal stability of the country.
I want to ask you, you just mentioned you guys are united, but last night it was a rarity. House Speaker John Boehner voted for the plan. Majority Leader Eric Cantor voted against it, as did Kevin McCarthy, his chief whip. Does that send a poor message to the rebellious group, the chuckleheads, as your colleague Steve Lafayette says, for these future fights you mentioned, that if Boehner and Cantor are split, there's no reason why we can't oppose the big deal?
Look, I'm proud of my speaker. The speaker knew what needed to be done. He provided the cover for us to do it. He let the conference work its will. You know, leadership is about leading, and I think he led last night, and I'll just leave it at that. But again, in the fights ahead of us, we're going to be awfully unified because there's not any difference in the ranks in terms of cutting spending and reforming entitlements. And I think the president, played his best card in the opening round of the poker game last night. He doesn't got to get that one again. The revenue questions are over. It's now all about spending and entitlement cuts, and we'll see how brave he is when it comes to dealing with his party.
Do you think that leadership style by Boehner is effective, though, to sort of let your House caucus vent, and essentially it's almost the prodigal son, right? They vent, they walk away, and they come back at the last minute. Can you do that with a debt limit deal, which would send the entire world economy into chaos?
Well, what's sending the world into chaos are $1 trillion deficits that the president is not serious about addressing. And the Senate that hadn't produced a budget in 3 years. So it's time for our friends on the other side of the rotunda and the other side of the aisle to belly up to the bar and put something on the table. We did last night. I'm proud of our conference for what it did. It was a difficult thing. I'm particularly proud of the speaker. But again, we'll see whether or not the leader of the free world is willing to lead, and we'll see whether or not his party is willing to follow when it comes to serious spending cuts and entitlement reform. That's the only way you can get fiscal stability.
Lastly, noted conservative columnist Charles Krauthammer said this on Fox News. I want to play it.
There are a lot of conservatives in the caucus, Republican caucus in the House, who hate the bill, and for good reason. I mean, this is a complete surrender on everything.
And I think Krauthammer speaks for some of your colleagues who viewed 84% of the Bush tax cuts being saved for permanently as a complete concession. You know the thirst for cutting spending in your conference is just it's very much there. With that thirst for spending cuts, do you honestly believe the president can walk into a real bipartisan negotiation in the next 60 to 90 days?
Well, that's up to the president, not up to us. Look, again, I do see when you can permanently end the alternative minimum tax and you can make 85% of the Bush tax cuts permanent for 98% of the American people, something we couldn't do when we had Bush in the White House in both houses, and you've got in front of you now 3 opportunities on the spending fund, to say that's a defeat. Look, nobody loves and admires Charles Krauthammer more than I do, but it was neither a defeat nor a surrender. It's the opening round in the campaign. campaign. Why don't we judge it at the end of this? And again, I think you'll see us in very strong position. We finally moved to ground where we can be united and defend ourselves. As long as the president had those the prospect of raising taxes on every single American over our head, he was in a strong position. That's gone this morning. I think I'm looking forward, honestly, to the next 90 days a lot more than I looked forward to the last 6 weeks.
Indeed. Republican Congressman Tom Cole of Oklahoma. We'll call those 80 Republicans that voted for the bill last night the Cole Caucus from this day forward.
Let's just call them the Spartans. They knew when they had to stand and fight.
Take care, sir. Thanks so much for being on the show.
You bet.
Let's bring in our Wednesday political power panel, Nia Malika Henderson, political reporter for the